Your father's, when he was blacklisted, there was that, obviously really dry time, and then his relationship with Alfred Hitchcock started in the 50s. Tell us how that came about, because I know he did a lot of Alfred Hitchcock Presents and a lot of TV, and he forged a whole new, reinvented himself again as a director.
Yeah, well, he had to.
Yeah.
Basically, he just had to. He was never one to give up. He was never one to sit down and just, collapse. He went toe-to-toe with Goebbels and toe-to-toe with Ribbentrop, so I think it would be okay for him to go toe-to-toe with Jack Warner or anybody else.
Yeah, well, Jack Warner was small potatoes after Goebbels and Ribbentrop.
Well, he had his moments.
That's true.
I don't, you know what, as I sit here right now, I can't tell you honestly the exact connection of how Hitch got involved with my father got involved with Hitchcock. My guess is going to be it was Joan Harrison, who was the associate producer to the Alfred Hitchcock Presents television series, and a friend and scriptwriter and close friend and confidant to the Hitchcocks.
Yeah. And our friend Norman Lloyd.
And of course Norman, yes. Yeah. Who actually, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I think Joan Harrison knew my parents from England, and I think with this film and with a couple of other films that my father made in the late 40s, he did break away from not only the mold of that, heroic romantic guy, but he was more involved in the actual production and production choices that were being made, including hiring actors, in hiring aspiring actors. He did a film close to this one called So Young, So Bad, and he found a couple of young women that he thought would be just perfect and gave them their first big breaks in movies. One was Ann Jackson, one was Anne Francis, and one was Rita Moreno. That's a pretty good trio. But by then he was all over it, and he was starting to direct. He was directing either by getting full screen credit or being hands-on on the set, being there. And I think Joan must have made that initial phone call. I know that the story goes that he was sitting in Hollywood and he was completely miserable and couldn't get a job, and the phone rang and it was Hitch. And my father said, yeah, right, sure. No. Yeah, it's a joke. And it wasn't. And he basically said, you come highly recommended and we'd like you to direct one of our shows. He ended up directing 29 episodes of Alfred Hitchcock.
Richard Erdman told me a story one night about an episode your father directed with Richard and Walter Matthau and Richard Keeley, and it was all down south about a phony speed trap town and so on and so forth. And he said the first day Walter Matthau said, what we don't want to do is start trying to outdo each other with hick accents. So, of course, by the second day, everyone is affecting these southern accents, and Dick told me your father got together and said, we really need to get through this, and you guys really need to knock this off. But Dick said your dad was just a really fine director who understood actors because he was one.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Really good.
And I really... I believe that episode was called The Crooked Mile.
Yes, it was.
And again, this is another one of those moments where when he was involved in directing the Hitchcocks especially, he loved to hire people. He knew people he had worked with before, and he did that because he knew their integrity, that he knew that they were professionals and they would do the job and bring something interesting to the part. He also liked to hire his old friends who were either retired or not able to get work, and that included Peter Lorre and Betty Davis. He hired both of them for Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Yeah.
So, and he was good about that. I worked with him.
You became an actress.
I did.
And how was that interaction with your father as a mentor and helping you? How did that whole part of your relationship evolve when you turned to acting? Did he try to discourage you initially, or did he just say, hey, this is what you want to do, I'm here to help you because I'm dad?
Okay, one word, tough. It wasn't my idea to be an actress. I loved singing and I loved dancing, so for me, I was headed straight to the musical theater. That's what I wanted to do. And it worked for a little while, and I had a wonderful time. And then he said, I think I was about 14, he said, there's this part in this movie I'm directing, I want you to play it. And I said, why? And he said, it'd be good for you, you get your SAG card, you know, blah, blah, blah. So I did it, and I look back at it, I'm just horrified. Because, well, truly, I mean, I was 14 years old, and I was playing a cigarette girl in a nightclub. You know.
You were a quick study.
I was apparently a quick study, and I was flirting. The whole scene that I had to play was flirting with this man, and I was saying things I just barely understood. You know, so it was so awkward, but I got my SAG card. And I did work as an actress with him again, in theater, in television, in feature films. I enjoyed it, I loved it. The best thing for me with my father in that regard is when he was my father, and when he was the director, he was the director. And he didn't cross the line. You know, which is kind of remarkable, I think. But because he was the consummate professional, he expected it of me. So I learned very quickly to not get lazy. You know, somebody asked me earlier what was the one thing that stands out about my father for me, and the one, you know, word, the one moment. I just say it's homework. When I was a kid, he said, do your homework, get your homework done, finish your homework, and then after dinner, show me your homework. And it was like bang, bang, bang. And then as an adult, when I was working with him as an actor or in either theater or whatever, and I would maybe have a question or something like that, he would just look at me and he'd say, do your homework. To the day he died, this was a man who did his homework. If he was curious about something, he would look it up. There were encyclopedias all over the house, in English, in German, and in French. If he couldn't find a satisfying answer in one language, he would go and look it up in a different. And he's a very, very intelligent man. He loved to study, he loved to explore, he loved to push himself and challenge himself to do things. And I think that's another key word with him, was to challenge yourself, push your own boundaries, see how far you can go with something. And he didn't mean that stretch. Yeah, he didn't mean that exclusively again with acting. He meant that in life too. If there's something you think you really want to do, and it terrifies you, but there's something that you just want to do it. Do your homework. Find out how to do it. Learn how to do it. If it's a trade, if it's an art, if it's a skill, whatever it is, go for it.
That is a nice segue into asking you, tell us about the movie, the documentary that you're making about your father and your mother.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Oh, gosh.
When did you decide to do this, and how is it progressing?
Okay, it's progressing nicely. Thank you very much. When did I decide? I think part of it was that for all of my life, when someone hears my name, first of all, I'm usually introduced as Paul Henreid's daughter. Yeah, aw. And when I was little, I didn't know, and by the time I hit my teens, it was kind of, huh? And then by the time I was, you know, a grown-up and had children of my own and had been in films and was teaching and doing many, many other things that I did in my life, I was still always Paul Henreid's daughter. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with being Paul Henreid's daughter. But I think I got pushed to the edge at some point, and I, in my totally smart, alecky way, said, well, you know, someday I'm going to put it all on a DVD and hand it to you, and then you'll know what it's like to be his daughter, and then you'll know what it's like growing up being his daughter, and all your questions will be answered. Little did I know when I said that, which was a long time ago. I guess 10 years ago, when I went back to Vienna for the first time and I had time on my hands, I really had a chance to explore where he grew up and what it was like to be a young man during the Belle Epoque, when you walk through those buildings that are just layered and layered in gold and fine art, and there's music pouring still to this day out of every concert hall, and there's a concert hall on every block. I mean, it was just extraordinary for me to touch, or to be touched by that. So that started it, so that's 10 years ago, and then it got really, really serious about 3 years ago. And the timing was perfect because that's when TCM had him as the star of the month, and we all got to watch 27 of his films, not just the 2 that everybody loves. So then I realized, you know, it's about time that somebody actually tell his story, because everybody at Warner Brothers, everybody who was a celebrity, a star at Warner Brothers, or most of the major studios, even if it was, you know, one of the 1-hour segments for A&E Biography Channel or something like that, everybody has one except him. So I'm guessing, as the cosmos likes to play with us, they were just waiting for me to do it. So I'm going to do it, and he's worth it. He had an extraordinary life. You know, these films are great to watch and to be entertained, but his life, his actual life, what he experienced and what he survived, and the fact that he was in love with, and I mean head over heels in love with, my mother for 60 years, and they worked as an extraordinary team through hell and high water. It's a good story.
Oh,
it's a good story.
In fact, your father's memoir, which is out of print with the inapt title Ladies Man, which the publishers put there probably to sell books.
Exactly.
It should have been Lady Man, meaning your mother. But he did have an extraordinary life. He's an extraordinary actor, and you're going to stay with us the whole weekend, aren't you?
I am. I'm here.
So Monika's going to be with us the whole weekend. But for now, I'd like to invite the all-access pass holders, guests, and everyone to our reception out on the patio. And tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., I will be introducing a restored 35mm print of The Chase, 1946. So thank you so much for coming and put it together for Ms. Monika Henreid. Thank you.